Hey everyone, and welcome back. So now we should have a NetBox and Nautobot systems up and running. If you would like to know how to install NetBox or Nautobot, then please check my previous videos in the channel. So what I'm going to do now is to demonstrate how we can populate data inventory to the NetBox system. And I believe it is 99% the same method will be applied on Nautobot. So what I will do in this video, I will cover this using only NetBox system. So before we even start, you need to understand that assigning objects and populate the data inventory randomly, it is not a good idea. And you might run into so many problems by doing that, especially if you are managing a complex and big network infrastructure. So with this being said, I will show you the best practice that you should follow to populate data inventory methodically, efficiently, and it is the recommended way for the order of operations. So what I will do now, I will open up a web browser and then I'll start typing NetBox documentation. And again, the link that you after is docs.netbox.dev. I'll click on that link. And then from the left-hand side here, you've got all the options that you can go through. I highly recommend that you read the NetBox documentation as it explains things thoroughly. And then what you need to do is click on the Getting Started option and pick the Planning option. At this point, I will scroll down all the way to find the order of operations, as you can see on the screen. Here we can see that when we initially start from a complete empty database, it isn't very clear where to begin. Hence, the documentation is providing all the information you need. We should always start with tenants and then move into sites and then move into devices and then move into providers, etc., etc. As you can see, you just literally can go down the list. But what I want to do now is I want to show you what happens if we start populating data randomly without planning things ahead. So I'll go ahead and try to log in. And let's say that we want to add a device for our inventory. And my first impression, you can see that there is an error message here or a warning message here that you before you add a device, you must create a site first, which means you can't add a device unless the site has been added, and some of the attributes under devices will be mandatory. So if I go ahead and click the add button for the device, I can see that we have loads of attributes such as name, device role, description, hardware components, we have location component, management, virtualizations, etc., etc. So what I will do is try to populate that data, let's say router 1. And when it comes to device role, I wouldn't be able to actually populate the data because device role table hasn't been configured yet. We haven't added any rule under the device role table, and therefore we wouldn't be able to fulfill this. So any attributes that has asterisk in front of it, it's a mandatory option. And the same applies for device type. So if I click on that, if I drop down the menu, I can't see any option that's been populated, and therefore I wouldn't be able to actually select the device type for the hardware section. And the same applies for the location. So I need to associate that device with a particular site. But again, there is no data being populated, so I wouldn't be able to do that. And if I go ahead and click the create button, nothing will happen. And if I scroll up, you can see that these fields are required and mandatory. So with that being said, what I want to do next is try to go through that list step by step and show you how we can add them accordingly. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and select the organization option. And from there, we can see there is a tenancy section, and under that section we have two options. We have the tenants and the tenant groups, so we should always start with the tenant groups. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to start adding the tenant group, and I will give it a name. I would say IEE tenant group. And the slug is just populated automatically. And in terms of description and tags, these are optional options. Feel free to populate them accordingly, but it's a lab environment, so I'm not going to be bothered with this. So I'm going to create this. And then what I can do next is I can go ahead and create a tenant. So I'll select on the tenants option. And again, I'll click the add button. And here I will be able to put the name of the tenant. That's again gets populated automatically. And when it comes to group, so I can associate it with the IEE tenant group. And again, description, tags, comments, you can add this accordingly. I'll go ahead and create the tenant. And then next we can go ahead and create a region. So if I go under the sites, I can go and select the regions option and go ahead and select add or click add. And what I'll do, I will say the United Kingdom as the region, and that's will be populated automatically. Again, description, I can just populate something for the sake of it. This is a test site. And then I will hit the create button. And then after that, I can then create a site group. Let's say if you want to have if you have bunch of locations or sites that resides in one city or one county, you can go ahead and group them together, and you can call that county, for instance, Cambridge, London, and whatnot. You can go ahead and do that. I would do that just to kind of like show you how it works. So if I put that there, I would say London, for instance, and that will again be populated automatically. Description, again, these are optional options. And then I'll click create. And now I'll go ahead and create the site. Again, click on the site and then go ahead and add a site. And that site, I'll call it Wembley. And that will be populated. The slug will be populated automatically. Again, the region, so I'm going to select the region as United Kingdom, and I will group that site with the London group. And again, you know, you will find loads of attributes that can be associated with a site, for instance. Please feel free to to fulfill these information. I'll just bypass them. Under the tenancy, I will associate that with the tenant group that I've created, and I'll associate with the site with the tenant that I've created. Contact information, physical address, shipping address, etc., etc. You can go ahead and add these as you wish, and then I'll hit the create button. Now that I've created this, we've got pretty much the basic locations, regions, and tenants have been created. And now what we can do next is we can go ahead and create some racks. But before we create the rack, we need to create like a rack rule first. So I'll go ahead and create like a rack rule, and I'll go ahead and add a new rack rule. And in here, I'll just call it DC axis. That will be populated, and you can even color it as well. So it's an axis, so you can color it amber, for instance. You can add a description as you wish, and then once you are happy with this, you can go ahead and populate that, and then we can add another role. So I would say here DC 4, for instance. And then I will change the color into orange. And here we have 2 entries. And with that being done, I can go ahead and create a rack. So the rack, again, it will be associated with a site. So I will associate it with Wembley. The name, I can just give it a name, random name, or obviously in my case, it will be kind of like a test name. So I'll call it rack 1, test assembly, and the status is active. And the rack rule, I will associate it with the DC axis. Again, you can populate the option with the optional options accordingly. Inventory control, tenancy. Again, I can do that. I can associate it with tenancy, dimension. So yeah, all of these information you can add according to your current environment and your current requirements. So in my case, I'll just leave things as default, and then I will hit the create button. So now we can see that we have created a rack where we are then should be able to populate devices underneath it, and it will be associated with the rack. So what I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to go and cover the manufacturers as well as the device types. So in order for me to add those data, I would need to click on devices. And then under devices, you will find a section called device types. I will click on manufacturers. And here I should be able to add Cisco, for example. And the slug is populated automatically. And then I'm going to create and add another one. And I'm going to call this one Fortinet. I'm going to create and add another one. And finally, I'm going to add the Juniper. And I'm going to click the create button. And in there, you should be able to see 3 different manufacturers that we have created for our inventory. And what I will do next, I'm going to add some device types. I'll click on the device type and then I'll click add. And then from there, I will select the manufacturer. The model itself, I would say it's 3750X. The slug will be automatically generated. Again, if you've got any other attributes that you would like to add, feel free to do so. But I will leave everything as default. If you know the part number or the PID, you can populate that here. And yeah, if you have more information regarding the device, you can populate them accordingly, either in the comment below or according to each of these attributes. And then once you're happy with populating the information, what you can do, you can just go ahead and click the create button. And as you can see here, we created a device type. If we go back to manufacturer, we should be able to see that Cisco has a device type of 1. And if we click on it, it will point back to the device type that we've created, which is the 3750X. Next, I will be tackling the platforms and device roles. So what I would do, I'll click on the platforms under devices, and then I'm going to click the add button. And here it is quite important to get the naming convention right, because if you are considering automation in the future, then you should put the name of the module here according to NetMuco. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say Cisco _ iOS. And then I will specify the manufacturer and the config template if you've got one. And then I will just put the description here as this is a platform for NetMuco. And then I'll click the create button. And now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and add the device role. So here I've got the options of defining what is the role or the main function of the device that I'm trying to configure or I'm trying to add into the inventory. So what I would do, I will say that this device is, the role of the device is part of a lab. And then I will just select a particular color to identify those that have the same device role should be associated with a certain color. And again, if you've got config templates, you can go ahead and associate that with the device. But I will just go ahead and create that. And at this point, we have managed to populate the fifth order of operation step. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go ahead and try to add a device. So I'll click on the devices, and then I'll click the add button. And here, I'm going to call that device is a router. And I will say the device rule is actually that router is part of a lab. And I would say this router is part of ENG lab setup. And then the hardware, I'm going to say this is the hardware. And the airflow, again, I will just leave these options by default. If you know the serial number, you can populate that data here, the asset tag, etc., etc. I will select the site that resides in Wembley, and I would say that is part of that rack. And then if you've got virtualization, you can add these information at a later stage. But at that point, we are able to create our first device, and I can go ahead and click the create button. And if I click on the device, you can see that router has been created with the associated data accordingly. Right, now what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to add data into providers and provider account. So what I'll do, I'll click on the devices again to pull up the menu, and then I'll go down to circuits. I'll click on it, and then under providers section, you will find providers option. I'll click on providers and then click on the add button. And here I'm going to call it provider 1. And then as you wish, if you would like to populate the rest of the information or the attributes, please feel free to do so. I'll go ahead and click create. And if I click on providers again, you'll see that this provider has been created. And what I'll do next, I'll go to provider accounts, and then I'll go to add. And then I will associate that account with provider 1, and I will call it provider 1 underscore account. And then the account ID will be unique. So in my case, I'll just call it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then again, if you want to add description, you can go ahead. Any comments? Yeah, I'll click on the create button. So again, I'll click on the provider accounts, and as you can see, the account has been created for that particular provider. And what I can do next, I can go ahead and create like a circuit types. And in here, I'll go on select circuit types, and then I'll click on the add button. And here I will be able to say NNI. And if you want to add any description, please feel free to do so. I'll create add, and then I will move into the circuits. I will add a new circuit. I'll select the provider. I'll select the account. Again, you can see the association between the circuit and the provider. The circuit ID can be just a unique reference that it is associated with the circuit ID in real life. Again, I'll say the type is NNI and the status is active. If you wish to populate this information, again, feel free to do so. Service parameters, you can fill that as well. And if you want to associate it with a tenancy, you can. But I'll leave that as default, and then I will hit the create button. Again, I'll click on the circuits, and you can see that the circuit has been created, and you can see that it's also been associated with the provider in question, and you can see that the type is NNI and the status is active, etc., etc. So what will we be doing next is we are going to add the RIRs and aggregates under the IPAM table. So again, click on the circuits to pull up the menu, and then go to IPAM. And then from there, you should be able to find the aggregates section. And inside that section, if you click on the RIRs, and in there you should be able to add new entries for the RIR. And then in here, I will be able to say, for instance, RFC 1918, and again, the slug will be populated automatically. Again, I will select that because this is going to be associated with private prefixes or IP addresses, which it can be, or I will populate them at a later stage. But yeah, I'll click on that one. So I'll go ahead and create that record. And then I will add another one as well. And also I will set that as a private. And then finally, I will add a third option where I'm going to call it ripe. And that will be public. So if I go to RIRs, I can see that I've got 3 different entries where I can then associate them with different IP addresses. Next, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to go ahead and create the aggregates. And what I'll do, I'll create add. And here, what I can do, I can say 10.0.0.0/16. And I will select this as part of the RFC 1918. And again, if you want to associate it with any of these attributes, you can go ahead, but I will just leave this as default. And as you can see, that aggregates has been created under RFC 1918 under aggregates. So what I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to configure the IP / VLAN rules. And in order for you to do so, you would need to click on the under Prefixes section, go and select Prefix and VLAN rules. So I'll go ahead and click that, and then I'll add I'll click the Add button. And then here, I would say the name of the rule, I would say is core. And then I will specify the weight, which is default is 1000. I will leave that as is. And I will hit create. What I'll do next is I'm going to go ahead and add a prefix. So again, click on the prefixes under the Prefixes section. And I will hit the add button. And here I would say I want to add that prefix. I'm going to assign it to active. Again, as part of VRF, you can go ahead and select the VRF associated with the prefix, the role. So I'm going to associate that with the core. And if you want to add description, tags, and if it's part of a particular site, you can go ahead and select that. And then also, if you already configured VLANs, you can assign that to a VLAN. Again, the same thing applies with tenancy. So you click on the tenancy group or the tenant group, and then click on the tenant, and fill these information according to your requirements again. And then once you're happy with this, you then go ahead and click the create button. And then if I click on the prefixes, you can see that the record has been created, and so far it hasn't been utilized yet. So what I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to go ahead and then create an IP address for the prefix that we've created. So go ahead and under the IP addresses section, select the IP addresses option, and then again, click the add plus button. And in here, you can say the IP address that you want to add, and I'll go ahead and assign that IP address to this particular object. And then again, I will select the rule. I would say this is part of, let's say, I would say this is part of a loopback. I know this is like quite a big subnet mask for this, but I would say /32. And the VRF, again, the VRF, I will leave it as the global or the default. If you've got DNS name, you can go ahead and assign that accordingly. Description, tags, etc., etc. I will leave that as default. I will assign the tenant group as IE tenant group, and the tenant is IE. And then if you've got also interface assignment, you can go ahead and do this, but I didn't configure any modules and interfaces, so I will leave that as default. If it's a part of a virtual machine, you can just select the virtual machine, and then obviously the virtual machine, it need to be created first before you do this. Before you do so, so I will make this as the primary IP for that device. And then if it's been natted, you can then add this option as well. And if you want to add any comment, you can go ahead and add comment, but I will leave the rest as default. So now that it's being created, what I want to do next, I want to go ahead and create some VLAN groups. So I will again, under IPAM, under VLANs section, if you click on the VLANs group and then click on add, so what I will do, I will start assigning a name for the VLAN group, and I would call this as a virtual app, and minimum VLAN ID is 1 and the maximum is 4094. And the scope, again, you can assign that to a particular scope, either to a rack, region, sites, etc. But I will leave that as default. I will click on the create button, and then once that has been done, I will go ahead and start creating a VLAN. So in here, you click on the VLAN options, and then you go to add button, and you say, for instance, what is the VLAN ID? I'm going to call that VLAN 100, and then you're going to just call that virtual lab VLAN. The status is active. The role is part of the core, let's say. Again, if you want to add description tags, and if you want to associate it with a particular tenant, you can go ahead and do that. And also if you want to also associate it with a VLAN group, you can go ahead and do that. And then once you're happy with this, you can then go ahead and create that VLAN. As you can see here, there is a lot of work to do when you add information for a single device, and I cannot iterate enough that this is important to add this data according to the planning documentation from NetBox official website and going through the correct order of operations as recommended by NetBox. So now that we have the basic data inventory here in NetBox, we can then try and explore how we can interact with this data using the API function from a Python script. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tech tutorials. If you have any questions or run into issues, feel free to ask in the comment below. Thanks for watching, and peace.